Chapter 176, Reading Again 7. I nodded and opened my mouth. Still, don't kill her. We must beat her. That woman has no intention of cooperating. I glanced at my blood-soaked mother. I didn't know if it was her blood or the blood of others. However, she was obviously at her limits. She had somehow been fighting with a reasonable probability, but her physical strength must have bottomed out. It was an inevitable result. She was alone, and this place had Yu Jonghyuk. Yu Jonghyuk had become transcendent and was on a completely different dimension compared to Peaceland. No matter how great the story, it was impossible with just a shadow. It wouldn't be easy to overcome a transcendent unless one part of the body descended, but my mother didn't have enough probability remaining. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is gulping. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband is paying attention to your choice. The constellation Abyssal Black Flame Dragon is observing your atrocious acts. I left my party members and headed towards my mother. Stop trying. The fourth wall is shaking faintly. Why are you stopping me? My mother's face didn't look good, despite it being barely visible through the shadow of the constellation. Only her eyes and mouth were barely revealed. It was a distance that could be crossed, but I could never reach her. It was the same in prison and even now. This had become our distance. She told me, if I talk, you won't listen. This person, why was she going so far? Why did she keep doing this despite her bloody body? My companions were watching me. Their eyes were asking me to make the right choice. I sighed and opened my mouth. Just once. I will listen just once, so tell me. I was surprised by the words that came out of my mouth. Tell me the story properly. I didn't know I could say this. I squeezed out these words even though I didn't know if I was sincere or not. My mother's eyes shook. How long can you stay like this? Don't keep it to yourself and tell me. Why are you blocking me? Mother, why did you come all the way here? Anything, saying anything is fine. If I say it. I saw the eyes that seemed like they would cry and realized all the stories so far had been connected. I was her child, so I knew. The reason my mother blocked me was related to why my mother wrote the essay. I would be hurt, I would break, my previous life might be ruined. Tell me, I had long thought about it. Perhaps it was the story I had already predicted. There were so many hints from the constellations that it would be odd if I didn't know. Nevertheless, I wanted to hear the story directly from my mother's mouth. It might completely change my life, but I had to listen, even if the wall shook again. It was because it was my story. Some stories couldn't be understood if I missed a page. Soon my mother's lips opened. However, in this damn scenario, it wasn't a story just involving mother and son. The nebula Vedas is looking at your fate. The nebula Olympus is looking at your fate. The nebula Papyrus is looking at your fate. A new drama wasn't allowed for us. The nebula's messages popped up and intense sparks filled the air. My mother grabbed her head with both hands and started to scream. I yelled and ran towards her. The moment my outstretched hand was about to reach my mother, the shadow of Founder's mother caught me. Constellation Kim Dokja, you can't pass here. There was a crack on the 8-beaded bell and black, muddy waves overflowed. There was a fierce sound like the sky was being ripped apart, and a vortex appeared in the sky. A portal was opening at the center of the vortex. The Great Hall. The excessive probability had summoned a being who would destroy everything. Everyone, don't look at it, close your eyes. I shouted the moment I discovered the tentacles coming from the hall. I didn't know about Yu Jonghyuk, who was a transcendent, but ordinary incarnations would collapse just from seeing such an existence. An outer god. Yu Jonghyuk's expression hardened. We were convinced when we saw the tentacles coming from the Great Hall. This was an outer god, a god who was called due to the sacrifice of Founder's mother. Thunder fell from the crack in the sky, while the distorted time and space screamed painfully. It was similar but different to when that guy was summoned on Peaceland. The one being summoned now was the true body of an outer god. Based on this scale, at least 1/3 of the true body would be summoned. The true body of a god, The shadow couldn't even be compared to it. Yu Jonghyuk, if we don't stop it. It is too late. It isn't a level I can stop. My body was trembling just looking at the sky. I could see it with the status of a constellation. The fourth wall is strongly activated. My trembling subsided a bit by fourth wall, but the fear didn't change. The existence beyond that great hall was something that couldn't be beaten even if the present Yu Jonghyuk and I combined strength. In the midst of this helplessness, I realized something. Now it wasn't a fight for incarnations. QA. Some of the incarnations with upper-grade constellations shed blood and died the moment they saw this existence. Yu Jonghyuk and I protected the party members and retreated. Yu Jonghyuk's eyes were becoming darker. I spoke in resistance. Don't worry, the constellations won't stay quiet once this type of guy descends. It was shown at the constellation banquet that the constellations and the outer gods didn't have a good relationship. In a situation where the god descended, no other constellations would intervene. The great sage, the equal of heaven, Uriel, and the slightly reliable black flame dragon. However, the constellations showed no response to the true body of the god passing through. Yu Jonghyuk spoke through gritted teeth. I don't know how they can be ignorant. It was a confusing situation for me as well. This was the descent of an outer god. Why wasn't anyone coming to help us? Some constellations are astonished by the coming of the outer god. Many constellations are complaining about the tyranny of some nebulae. What? The constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, is showing hostility to the nebula Papyrus. The constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, is baring his fangs to the nebula Vedas. The constellation, demon-like judge of fire, resents the atrocious acts of the nebula Olympus. Now I realized, I see, this damn situation. All constellation on the Korean peninsula are wondering which nebula you will choose. This was all happening because of me. The messages popped up in turn. A number of nebulae want you to inherit their stories. If you inherit a story, your existence will be forcibly bound to the nebula. The nebula Olympus wants you to inherit Lightning Carnival. The nebula Olympus wants you to inherit Thunder Guide. The nebula Papyrus wants you to inherit Master of the Typhoon Wolf. The nebulae are offering you a final choice. All the constellations on the Korean peninsula are watching your choice. I laughed. This was why I didn't like the constellations. Lightning Carnival, Thunder Guide, Master of the Typhoon Wolf. They were all stories of constellations, with histories of killing their own relatives. At the same time, each nebula had a powerful story. Perhaps if I succeeded their stories, I would be able to repel the outer god. Then my mother would die here. Yu Jonghyuk was watching me. His eyes asked what I was going to do. I said to him, Yu Jonghyuk, do you remember the nebula we made? Kim Dokja's company. It wasn't simply to save my mother. Everything would end if I belonged to a nebula. There was no way I could overcome the unfair contract with them, and I would never be able to reach the end of the story. You still want to use that name? Yu Jonghyuk frowned as he moved close to me and pulled out a sword. I will choose the name of the nebula. I smiled at the thought that Yu Jonghyuk was joking. The energy of transcendence could be felt by my side. It was strangely relieving despite the presence of a person who had long surpassed my scale. It might be because I felt like we were standing on the same horizon for the first time since the scenario began. I declared towards the stars in the night sky, I won't bow to your fate. I pointed my sword towards those silent gazes. I will decide my story. Then I heard a laugh come from somewhere. Along with the laughing sound, I heard a whisper from the universe that seemed to be mocking these insignificant worms. Unfortunate constellation. Who killed your father with your own hands? Who will destroy your mother? Who will see the downfall of your precious things? I stared at the outer god. If he finished his descent, the second floor of Dark Castle would be completely erased. It was a different situation from Peaceland. There was no place to go if a crisis happened here. However, Inside me was a constellation, who was as weary of the word fate as I was. A few hundred years have passed and things haven't changed. Damn son of a bitch. Chiak Yungyong's presence inside me started to be released. I didn't know if it was possible for Chiak Yungyong to cope with the god from another world. Still, I had no choice but to believe in him. Chiak Yungyong shouted towards Founder's mother, who was half eaten by the god from another world. Founder's mother, why did you make a deal with the outer god? It was a deep and resonant voice filled with anger. Since when did Hangik become so cheap? Surprisingly, the Founder's mother replied, I didn't make a deal with the outer god. Then what is this situation? I'm sorry, there was no other way. To protect the scenarios of the Korean peninsula, this incarnation should be here. That man shouldn't return to the Korean peninsula, otherwise the other nebulae. Did you make a deal with the nebulae? Chiak Yungyong exclaimed. Are you still so obsessed with that little land that you are now betraying your descendants? You don't know, you. What the hell is this? Where is the creation god? Why is he invisible when something like this is happening? The creation god. However, the words of Founder's mother didn't finish. The next moment, I felt Chiak Yungyong looking towards the sky. Don't tell me. The night sky sent an indirect message before answering. The nebulae declares that anyone who helps Goryeo's first sword will be regarded as their enemy in the future. Then, like magic, the indirect messages in the night sky became calm. I heard the voices of the great sage, the equal of heaven and Uriel, but they seemed unable to intervene due to their own interests or special reasons. Chiak Yungyong gazed at the night sky through my eyes. I could feel the explosive emotions mixed in the silence. Chiak Yungyong's rage and sadness, his grief and his decision. You can feel proud. Chiak Yungyong spoke to me. Those who are at the highest point in this damn world are afraid of you. What is pride worth when I am going to die? You won't die. They were just words, but they were words spoken by a constellation. As if putting a buoy against fate, all the stories built by Chiak Yungyong were rooted in my existence. I won't let you die. Chapter 177, Reading Again 8. Chiak Yungyong's story filled my whole body, while the stories of Chiak Yungyong scattered through the star stream started to gather. It was a good story that improved the status of existence just by reading. The story Dragon's Blood has become known. The story Wiping Out an Army with One Sword has become known. The story Battlefield Slaughterer has become known. He was a strong man from birth. He was born with a dragon's bloodline. Chiak Yungyong has appeared. He cut 36 enemies alone. From the time of Chiak Yungyong's birth until now, he didn't know about the scenario, but he heard stories that were part of the scenario. The story Exiled from the Scenario has become known. He is too strong. Exile him from this scenario. Use every means possible to send him to another world. I watched the passing history and felt anger, sadness, joy, and frustration, just like Chiak Yungyong. After the bout of emotional feelings, Chiak Yungyong's face and solid body were seen. I had never seen Chiak Yungyong before, but I seemed to know him better than anyone else. This story was Chiak Yungyong. Why are you going so far to help me? Who knows why? 5 constellations on the Gampyongui were consumed in exchange for summoning Chiak Yungyong. However, the thing he was doing for me now far surpassed 5 constellations. No constellation would disclose the base of his story to an incarnation. In addition, Chiak Yungyong wasn't my sponsor. I was like you. One of Chiak Yungyong's stories flowed into my head. The story One Who Fights Against Fate has become known. Place fate on him, this person has to die. The words of the constellation struck me. I knew that Chiak Yungyong had been wronged. I didn't know he was affected by fate just like me. A long time ago, Chiak Yungyong experienced the same thing due to the constellations. I saw the rising notification windows. The story One Who Fights Against Fate has begun. Chiak Yungyong's story was my story. Chiak Yungyong laughed. It isn't the same size as your fate. There was only one nebula who did this damn thing to me. Jiak Yungyong spoke as he watched the world through my eyes. At that time, I survived with the help of Hongik. However, I still often think about it. I shouldn't have received the help of any nebulae. Jiak Yungyong's spirit emerged from my chest. That's why I want to help you. He raised the sword in my hand and took a specific posture. The outer god, who had almost swallowed the founder's mother, roared. Jiak Yungyong also pulled out all his aura. The unbroken faith in my hand was crying violently. A good sword. The sword shook as if in response to the remark. My magic power was reduced, like there was a bottomless pit, while particles of pure ether gathered in my sword. An ether blade that was over 10 meters in length was formed. I shook from the formidable power and tried not to lose focus. I will borrow it for a while. My body was completely possessed by Jiak Yungyong, and I started to run with unbroken faith in my hands. It was an overload that I couldn't cope with, despite my overall stats being over level 100. The bones in my body creaked and the group exploded, forming a huge crater. I was confident that I could cut anything with this power. However, I was engulfed in a sense of despair as soon as I leapt into the void and confirmed the enemy. It was an emotion I felt while living in the human world. Could I kill such a huge thing? The outer god beyond the Great Hall exceeded imagination just from the size. The diameter of the body alone was at least 1 kilometer. Each of the 12 legs attached to the body had a diameter of several dozens of meters. Still, not even 1/5 of it had passed through yet. If all of this guy appeared, who the hell could kill it? Jiak Yungyong read my despair and laughed. I am Jiak Yungyong. It felt like the world was listening, or it was a declaration to the entire star stream. The strongest military leader on the Korean peninsula. Then the sword moved. There was a moment when I didn't know what I was doing, despite being the one to do the action. It was the swordsmanship of Jiak Yungyong. Two-sword style, two-sword mountain chop. Jiak Yungyong's sword moved. It wasn't a sword for cutting humans. It wasn't a sword for cutting monsters. It was a sword to cut nature. The blade that was over 10 meters moved twice in succession. This was a giant cracking sound. It looked more like darkness was flowing than blood, and looking closer, the darkness seemed like printed letters. I recognized it as the story of the outer god. In a way, the outer god was the same type of existence as the constellations. Along with a scream, the god's tentacles were separated from the torso and fell to the ground. It was like a huge building was falling. The astonished incarnations evacuated in all directions, while I was surprised in another sense. A human could cut something like this. I felt awe for a being who was born a human but went beyond humans. However, a terrible pain came after the amazement. Achiak Gyuwu. I started groaning from the terrible pain. A violent storm was battering my body. I shivered like a person electrocuted by hundreds of thousands of volts. The bones in the hand that swung the sword were destroyed and my mind shriveled like a crushed bug. Strong power came with great responsibility, and in this world, the name of this responsibility was probability. Still, I wasn't ready to take responsibility yet. The constellation, Goryeo's first sword, is looking at you. Jiak Yungyong was sharing the probability, but I was still too weak to handle his strength. Jiak Yungyong sighed. Weaker than I thought. I thought you could afford this much because you are a constellation. I wanted to say that he had too much brute strength, but my words didn't emerge. Cough, pant. Instead of throwing up food, I threw up electricity. I sat on the ground and breathed out for a few minutes before I barely managed to escape the probability storm. I looked up and saw the scene made by Jiak Yungyong. The sword that cut mountains. Jiak Yungyong had turned 2 of the 12 tentacles into rags from the one attack. In other words, he cut 2 mountains. However, there were 10 mountains in the torso remaining. Jiak Yungyong's voice was dark. It is insufficient. It might be possible if I could use more 3 swords. There are more than 3 swords. I haven't used it yet, but in your situation, I doubt I can even use 3 swords. I gritted my teeth. The summoning speed of the outer god was accelerating. Even if the scale of probability had been almost adjusted, the summoning continued, and it seemed furious from the blow. Is there any way to negotiate with that guy? Negotiate? How will you negotiate with it? It is also a god. Chiak Yungyong noticed my intentions and interrupted me. If you are trying to save your mother, give up. It is a situation where the shadow of Founder's mother is eaten. Your mother's soul would already be scattered. It hasn't happened yet. The outer god doesn't eat its prey that way. It sounds like you are aware of the outer gods. Chiak Yungyong didn't know. I really did know the outer god. I once again looked at its appearance. The two giant tentacles and body were covered in a thick fog, making it not visible. The body, that was reminiscent to a giant canal, provoked cosmic awe just seeing it. There was no doubt. The Yu Zhanghyuk of the 136th regression fought against this very god. In fact, while I was sitting down and trying to breathe, Yu Zhanghyuk was fighting against another tentacle. By using the power of transcendence along with giant body transformation, Yu Zhanghyuk looked like a half-god who had descended. The power of breaking the sky sword moved over a tentacle, and it shook painfully. Using his own strength, Yu Zhanghyuk damaged the outer god. The level was still insignificant compared to Chiak Yungyong, but Chiak Yungyong spoke in an admiring voice. This reminds me of me in my prime. With this type of talent, he might be able to catch up with me after a long time. Yu Zhanghyuk avoided the moving tentacles and cut off 1/3 of a tentacle. However, there was a limit to the blow he could deal. Yu Zhanghyuk stepped back and gasped. Kim Dokja, this guy is the Eater of Dreams. I met him in the second regression. Once eaten by him, you will live in his space for the rest of your life and have your stories extracted. You must never enter his mouth. It was information I already knew, but I nodded anyway. As Yu Zhanghyuk and I was recuperating, the summoning of the god kept accelerating. Now almost 1/3 of his body was summoned. The summoned tentacles started to riot, and the landscape hundreds of meters around them were completely devastated. Some incarnations screamed as they were hit by the tentacles. The Eater of Dreams wasn't a great old one, but it was still a cosmic god. The stories from Earth couldn't deal with it unless they joined forces. Chiak Yungyong spoke in a dark voice. If he fully descends, it isn't possible even with my strength. We have to attack now. However, the situation wasn't advantageous to us at all. Sparks flew as soon as Chiak Yungyong pulled up his story again, crushing my heart. This damn probability doesn't help at all. This was all the probability I could use, despite the outer god being summoned. The meaning of this was simple. Someone had assigned the amount of probability that could be used to us. It was stupid to ask who was behind this. I bit my lips and blood flowed down. We still need to do it. Use the three-sword style. Your presence might disappear if I use it. This is the only chance. Yu Zhanghyuk, join forces with me this time. Yu Zhanghyuk nodded. I once again started running with unbroken faith in my hand. The sparks of probability flew with every step that I took. Would it be possible? I didn't know. This time I might really be crushed by the probability storm. Still, I had to do it. I had always done it, and it would be the same again. Kyuhyuk. Before I could even run 10 steps, the probability grabbed onto my ankle again. This time, the recoil was greater. As expected, it was impossible alone. I needed someone's help, but who could help me now? It was different from the time with the absolute throne. The constellations who try to help me now would become enemies with the huge nebulae. The constellation, Maritime War God, is looking at you. The amount of sparks around me were gradually decreasing. The Duke of Loyalty and Warfare, Yi Sun-sen. He led the upper-grade constellations of the Korean Peninsula and contributed to my probability. Chiak Yungyong was slightly touched. Duke of Loyalty and Warfare. There was a story that you are more likely to become a narrative grade than me. The constellation Maritime War God is nodding lightly. Well, okay. The stories added, are there any more? Are there no more constellations courageous enough to confront this god? The sky was silent. Apart from the Duke of Loyalty and Warfare, no one else took on my probability. Then Chiak Yungyong's angry roar emerged. Baldy, come quickly and help. Aren't you someone who fights for justice? The constellation Bald General of Justice bows his head. Fucking one-eyed jerk, what are you doing? The constellation One-Eyed Maitreya is tightly holding his eye patch. Chiak Yungyong shouted towards the world, without worrying about his probability being wasted and his status being damaged. All of you are hiding even in this situation. Aren't you constellations? General, Maitreya, King, you don't deserve to be called this. The constellations of the Korean peninsula are silent at the words of Goryeo's first sword. Yet there still weren't any constellations who moved. At this moment, a figure staggered in the distance. The woman breathed roughly as she reached out to this side. It was Min Ji-won. Fortunately, she was alive. The constellation, Lady of the Brocade Sleep, is looking at you. Then a message was heard. The constellations of Scylla are bearing your probability together. The constellations of Scylla were helping me. It was a modest level of help, but they were still constellations. The nebula, Vedas, feels resentment towards Lady of the Brocade Sleep. The constellation, Lady of the Brocade Sleep, is exhausted from the excessive probability and has fallen into a deep sleep. A constellation closing their eyes meant they had suffered significant damage to their existence. Even so, the will of Lady of the Brocade Sleep seemed to have affected the other constellations of the Korean peninsula. I felt a prickling sensation as eyes started to gather on me. The constellation, Bald General of Justice, says he doesn't care and is looking at you. It started with Samyongdang. The constellation, One-Eyed Maitreya, is looking at you with half an eye. The constellation, King Humu the Great, is swearing as he looks at you. The constellation, First Spiritualist of Joseon, sighs and looks at you. The sparks covering me dwindled in an instant. It was finally turning into a likely probability. The nebula, Olympus, declares that maritime war god is an enemy. The nebula, Papyrus, is furious at the constellations of the Korean peninsula. Thanks to me, the whole Korean peninsula was covered with war clouds. Chiak Yungyong laughed. This is why I curse this land, but I can't leave, fighting to the death with a few people. The minimum of preparations is reached. Finally, Chiak Yungyong prepared his three-sword style. TL note. I suddenly received notice of a sudden work conference I have to go to as a substitute on the weekend. I'm heading interstate tomorrow, so the rest of this week's chapters will be posted by the end of today. I'll see you Monday. Chapter 178, Reading Again 9. I held onto unbroken faith. My muscles expanded from the powerful stories. It was like a dragon's blood was flowing through my heart. Move while the force is building up. We have to make a gap. Yu Jonghyuk came forward first. I will buy as much time as possible. The movements of the tentacles were more active than before, and the ground was almost in ruins. We tried to move this guy as far away from the party members as possible. Help! Yu Jonghyuk raised his magic power and moved forward. Meanwhile, I moved behind the Eater of Dreams. It was to find a place where I could hurt the main body as much as possible without hitting the tentacles. The body was at least 1 kilometer in diameter, so it was a hard job to find the weak spot. In the meantime, Chiak Yungyong built up his strength. The 1 sword and 2 swords were powerful enough, but they couldn't be compared to the huge force building in my right arm. It was doubtful if this was really the power of an upper-grade constellation. Damn, this is the limit for this body. This much is possible with the support of the probability. Chiak Yungyong grumbled as the accumulation of power almost finished. Don't be too elated. I don't know if I can cut all the tentacles and hurt the body with this much strength. I guess the opponent is an outer god after all. Do you have a plan? I asked with a bit of expectation. He spoke so confidently that I thought Chiak Yungyong had a countermeasure. Chiak Yungyong thought for a moment before replying. I will hit him with the three-sword style and hope he is tired enough to go back. Didn't you say you would protect me? I will protect you, I promised in my name. The strongest person on the Korean peninsula is relying on luck in this situation. I flinched at the magic power that exploded from unbroken faith. Was he angry? However, Chiak Yungyong calmed down. I know the demon of the horizon. The demon of the horizon. I heard this name and glanced at Yu Jonghyuk, who was still fighting. He didn't seem able to listen in on our conversation. Chiak Yungyong continued speaking. I will ask him to send you to another world. There is no time limit on the 9th scenario. If you flee there, you will be able to live for a while. Of course, you will have to take care of things after that. What type of demon has that power? Rather than a demon, he is closer to a god. You don't need to know the details. You would be better off praying not to meet him. I didn't know the relationship between Chiak Yungyong and the demon of the horizon. I pretended differently, but I knew that name. It was because the demon of the horizon was the existence who sent Shin Yusung of the 41st regression here, and who supplied the disasters to the Dakibus. I wasn't sure how Chiak Yungyong knew the demon of the horizon, but perhaps he was the one who helped when Chiak Yungyong was exiled from the scenario. Can other people escape this way? Such a large amount of probability isn't allowed. The Dakibus also won't allow it. But once this happens, all the people left here will die. If I ran away, the people here would be swallowed up by the Eater of Dreams and have their stories swallowed. Chiak Yungyong clicked his tongue. That isn't any of my business. Don't worry about the others. Take care of your own life. Life is about being alone anyway. As expected of Chiak Yungyong, his life philosophy was very pessimistic due to his life of betrayal. A gap run. I used electrification and flew forward with all my speed at Chiak Yungyong's sudden shout. I passed through 2 or 3 tentacles, but there were still 5 or 6 blocking the way. It was dangerous to get closer. There was the place where I should stop. Goryeo's first sword. I have an idea. An idea? What is it? Concentrate instead of speaking nonsense. To be honest, it is impossible to kill him with the 3-sword style. You should already know it. The ground that the tentacles touched subsided. It would be instant death if I was touched, no matter Chiak Yungyong's defense. However, Chiak Yungyong's pressure would kill me before the tentacles. I shouted as Chiak Yungyong's power pressed down on me. I'm not saying this to provoke you. Just think about it realistically. Chiak Yungyong's pressure decreased at my words. So, do you have a way to beat that guy? I do. If you help, perhaps I can kill the outer god. Chiak Yungyong laughed in a dumbfounded manner. Kill the outer god? Do you know what you're saying right now? This is an outer god. It would be hard even for those damn Olympus and Vedas guys. There is no way I would say this if it was another god. However, the Eater of Dreams, it might be possible. I am listening. What is the method? Hurt his body and throw me into it. Chiak Yungyong was confused and at a loss for words. The giant tentacles were coming once again. If you do that, you will die. You won't survive being eaten by him. Didn't you hear the words of that good-looking guy before? Once you are eaten by him, I will survive. I was convinced as I listened to him. I was certain that I could survive being eaten by this outer god. No constellation, let alone a mortal, could feel this conviction. Chiak Yungyong trembled as if he was incensed and opened his mouth. Is there something you can do? I can't say it is 100%. I might be able to get help from the demon of the horizon through Chiak Yungyong, yet there would be nothing left for me if I survived alone. Escape was a denial of everything I had built up so far. Thus I chose this approach. Q-hug. The silent Chiak Yungyong suddenly gave a huge laugh. It was a laugh that seemed to fill the plains. I lived long enough to see the day. The day when a man like you believes he can fight against that god. Finally, the upper body of the Eater of Dreams started to be summoned. The first eye that watched the world was revealed. As soon as the gaze of the Eater of Dreams touched on the ground, The sensation filled me with more trepidation than I had ever felt. If I fought this thing, I would die. No matter what I did, I couldn't win against it. Chiak Yungyong sighed. Stupid constellation. Yes. I like you, so don't die. I nodded and ran. The mountain of tentacles soared into the sky. I used electrification, and there was a blue-white trail everywhere I passed. Come, outer god. Chiak Yungyong gripped the sword in my hand. All of Chiak Yungyong's stories were gathered, and the three-sword style was expressed. I, Chiak Yungyong, will cut you. The ether blade increased. The blade that was 10 meters long increased to 20 meters. The blade that was 20 meters long increased to 30 meters. The power that transcended my magic power, and my story was falling down here. Three-sword style, three-sword ocean chop. I knew it the moment I drew the sword. This. In my head, I saw Chiak Yungyong standing in front of the sea. Chiak Yungyong watched the sea from dawn to dusk. All the years of watching the sea, looking at the distant horizon until he saw the target. It was one line that distorted the balance of time and space. The waves split apart, and the waters had the illusion of splitting. This was a sword made to cut the sea. The constellation, maritime war god, admires the power of Goryeo's first sword. The constellation, abyssal black flame dragon, admires the power of the pure human constellation. The constellation, prisoner of the golden headband, shows great interest in Goryeo's first sword. The air exploded, and all sound was swallowed. I swung my sword despite feeling like my body was going through a blender. One sword, two swords, three swords. After wielding three swords, the fuse of my consciousness was completely broken. Really, just wait a moment. Vup. Then Chiak Yungyong called out to me. Wake up, stupid constellation. I barely managed to open my eyes and saw a few strands of tentacles floating in the air. However, the tentacles were no longer what I remembered. 7 of the 12 tentacles had been cut apart and fell to the ground. Chiak Yungyong was an upper-grade constellation. He cut half of the tentacles with his own strength. Nevertheless, Chiak Yungyong spoke like he was angry. I couldn't cause a deep wound because of lacking strength. I couldn't cut him with the sword that cuts the sea. No, this is enough. It is enough for success. Chiak Yungyong was successful. Beyond the tentacles, there was a huge horizontal scar on the main body. The three-sword style had cut off the tentacles and wounded the main body. It was a small wound compared to the size of the guy, but it was wide enough for me to enter. A pained cry burst out from the Eater of Dreams. I had to run over there. I had to do it right now. Before his wound healed, I must enter the wound. This was the way to end this scenario. The Nebula Vedas is ridiculing your adversity. Damn it, I want to deal a blow to those damn nebulae. By the way, the Nebula Papyrus is toasting your scenario. My legs didn't move. No matter how much strength I used, my legs wouldn't budge. No, I couldn't even feel my strength. What? The constellation, Queen of the Darkest Spring, is looking at you with sad eyes. I looked down and realized the state I was in. I couldn't see anything below my knees. My lower legs had disappeared like it had been cut by something. Blood constantly flowed from the cut sections. It was probably the world of the tentacles while I was using the three-sword style. Damn it, I was almost there, yet a situation like this occurred. In the meantime, the duration of electrification ended. Little by little, the injury on the god was healing. It wasn't a distance I couldn't cross in the state where I lost my lower legs. Kim Dokja. I turned my head and saw the bloody Yu Jonghyuk. Yu Jonghyuk staggered to me, grabbed me by the collar and lifted me onto his shoulders. He looked at the wound on the god and asked, I have to throw you over there. Can you do it? Yu Jonghyuk didn't answer. He just showed it with his actions. Yu Jonghyuk jumped onto what seemed like stairs in the air. He stepped on the tentacles while using air steps. I could hear a slight creaking sound from Yu Jonghyuk's body. His body was already at the limit. Even so, Yu Jonghyuk didn't give up. He climbed and climbed again. Soon afterwards, the distant wind soaked my cheeks. Yu Jonghyuk stopped his magic power and paused. I looked up, and the wound on the god was right in front of me. Despite the lack of time, Yu Jonghyuk hesitated. He hesitated while holding tightly to my collar. "We don't have to hold another funeral, right?" I smiled because of Yu Jonghyuk's question. "Even if I die, I will rise again." "That isn't what I mean." Yu Jonghyuk's expression was serious. A high wind blew between me and Yu Jonghyuk. I looked at him for a moment before asking, "Do you remember the second scenario?" The subway of Aksu Station. It was where Yu Jonghyuk first appeared after smashing everything. He was a cold-blooded regressor who would use whatever means necessary for the results. Yu Jonghyuk's calm eyes shook at my words. Who would have known at the time? Me and this guy, we would actually end up as companions. I hadn't wanted to admit it, but now I had to. The things that hadn't seemed possible became reality. I was actually going through the scenarios with him. That's why I could now say it, just like I did when I first met him on Han River Bridge. This was the way that suited us best. Release your hand and get lost, you damn son of a bitch. Chapter 179, Unable to be Eaten 1. Yu Jonghyuk's expression slowly changed as he held me by the neck. Previously, I would already be falling through the air. Now everything was the opposite. I flew through the air instead of falling. Yu Jonghyuk had thrown me as hard as he could. Yu Jonghyuk was watching me. His expression showed he was certain that I wouldn't die. I didn't hear his voice, but I could tell what he was saying. "Feed him one blow, Kim Dokcha." The moment I was about to answer, the tentacles blocked my gaze. The attack of the tentacles missed me by a hair's breadth, and I landed on the Eater of Dreams' body. I used the strength remaining in my arms to grab the body and move towards the wound. This guy was a life-threatening presence just through touch. If I was still an incarnation, I might have already passed out or died. If he finished his descent, it was scary to think about what might happen. I threw my body into the wound. "I'm sorry, I can't go with you." Power drained from my body, and I felt Chiak Yungyong's strength scattering. I didn't panic because I had already expected it. Soon afterwards, the wound connected to the outside completely closed. I floated in the air, like a person floating in the universe. The inside of the Eater of Dreams was as dark as the sky. It was a space with no blood or flesh. It was natural since the outer god wasn't a living thing. Dungs dungs dung. I heard the sound of drums coming from somewhere. Then there was a whispering. Someone gazed at me. It wasn't hard to breathe despite there being no air. Perhaps the moment I entered this space, my very existence was transformed. Then after a while, all sounds disappeared. The screams of the incarnations and the messages of the constellations were gone. Instead, there were unknown characters and images. This was the stomach of the Eater of Dreams. It was a place where all the stories he had eaten were gathered. There were some stories I could recognize. Perhaps they were from Founder's mother. "It is my fault. The foolish history was too long. I have to protect this land from the nebulae. However, now there is no one in Hangik. Where have all the gods of creation gone? Chwanung, I want to see Chwanung." Then a story with a small light came up to me and shouted, "What are you doing? Why are you here? Run away." The light flickered. Thank you, but there was nowhere for me to run away to. The outer gods were existences rooted in the distant outer universe. Half of his body was connected to the second floor of Dark Castle, while the inside of his body was directly connected to the outer universe. Thus his stomach was like outer space to me. It was a world of sheer emptiness, only filled with the desire to eat. The Eater of Dreams wanted me. The scattered letters gathered together and started to form a shape. In this empty space, eyes and a mouth were created. In fact, I wasn't sure if they were eyes or a mouth, but I had to think of it in these terms since I was a human. He seemed to be saying something, but his voice wasn't heard properly. After a while, the letters shivered and started to transform into words that I could understand. The smell of an interesting story. The moment that two eyes looked at me, I gulped without knowing it. This was the presence of a god who caused fear in even the narrative-grade constellations. The presence of an inferior scenario. How do you hear me? The exclusive skill Fourth Wall is extremely active. The fourth wall became more active than it had ever been so far. I felt like a wall was growing on my skin. It meant this enemy was dangerous. He wasn't even a great old ones. I couldn't imagine what the gods such as the fear of Sarnath, horror from the hills, or master of Arlae would be like. I took a deep breath and slowly opened my mouth. Eater of dreams, you are a great god of another world. Though, the letters of Eater of Dreams twitched like he was surprised by my words. In this guy's eyes, I wasn't even a bug. I was a strange toy he could erase at any time. Strong sparks occurred around me and the letters started to revolve. There was something that wanted to penetrate inside me. However, as soon as it reached my side, it was bounced off. The letters of Eater of Dreams spoke in a subdued manner. What are you? Are you under a special protection? This guy had attempted to mentally invade me. Then he had been bounced off by the fourth wall. I would have been destroyed if I didn't have this skill. I controlled my heart and looked at the Eater of Dreams. As I said before, the Yu Zhanghyuk of the 136th regression was eaten by him. However, Yu Zhanghyuk didn't die. In other words, my current basis was his 136th attempt. I slowly opened my mouth so that I wouldn't be caught by his boundaries. I came to tell you a story. Story, I like stories. The outer god reacted immediately. The monstrous greed caused him to become fuzzy. Among all the stories you have eaten, there are those belonging to Lee Suk-young. Please send her back. The face looked puzzled. This isn't a story. I will tell you a story in exchange. What story will you tell me? I pointed to myself without speaking. It was obvious what I meant. I was making a bet with my existence at stake. The big eyelids slowly blinked. Small constellation. Yes. Do you intend to make a deal with me? The moment I was going to open my mouth, shapes appeared in the air. It was an image made up of the stories that Eater of Dreams had devoured. The bear doesn't talk to the fish. The image shown was a giant bear, reminiscent of Founder's mother. The bear looked around with foolish eyes and caught the fish flowing through the empty universe. The Eater of Dreams looked at the bear and said, "Human, I don't negotiate with bugs." I hadn't been properly recognized yet. A half-constellation couldn't deal with a cosmic deity. It was a natural story. However, I shook my head. If bugs talk like humans, think like humans, and act like humans, they can't be called bugs anymore. I glared at the two huge black eyes. You aren't qualified to make a deal with me. I can take away everything you have at any time. Then why are you talking to a bug instead of taking it away? The bear eating the fish looked at me. The bear raised its paws in a threatening manner, as if it was going to hit me right away. I stared at the bear and said, "The bear knows how to eat fish, but it doesn't know how to eat them deliciously." The bear's paw hesitated. The feet are damaged by the scales. The claws are dirty after taking out the guts of the fish, and it just fills its anger. Just as I'm not a bug, you're not a bear. Isn't that right? The letters in the space jumbled together, and the Eater of Dreams' face became bizarre. Usually, I would be terrified, but I had read the original novel. I started grinning. This situation was too pleasant for me to bear. All the stories will be damaged if you forcibly take them. If you trample on me right now, you won't get a perfect story. I will tell you a story that you can eat in its best condition. You'll always be able to eat it. Dung dung dung. Once again, I heard a drumming sound. It was like a giant beast's pulse. The tempo of the sound became increasingly faster. Dung 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 dung. I had read the original work and knew the identity of this drumming sound. I want to eat you. This sound was the Eater of Dreams' hunger. I gulped and raised both hands. If you keep your promise, I will give you a lot. The letters turned into smoke and started to form a shape. After a while, it took on the appearance of my mother. Is this what you want? I nodded. This story has some interesting corners. I saved it because it smelt more delicious than the shell of the constellation I ate along with it. I want to eat you very badly, but I can't afford to give you this story. Are you a beast who can't control your hunger? Is there anyone who would be offended by the insults of bugs? Fucking bastard. I didn't know what rank he was among gourmets, but he was low among the outer gods. The letters formed a brutal smile. The conversation with you ends here. I will eat all of you. The image of the bear who caught the fish flew towards me, baring sharp teeth like a piranha. There was no place to run away. My legs couldn't move, and in any case, I was in his stomach. Shit, fine. If you want to eat, then eat as much as you like. Instead, I spread open my arms and greeted him. Be sure to eat all of it. Hundreds of fish started to eat at my body. They bit at my arms, my legs, my back, and my face. I felt a terrible pain, but no blood came out. Instead, it was letters. The stories and histories I had built up started to leak out after I was bitten by his teeth. Oh, this is. The god shrieked with joy at the heavenly delicacies. My consciousness was blurred and there was a pounding in my head. Nevertheless, I held on. I had to hold on until he ate the part I was thinking about. Oh. The next moment, something poured out of me like a waterfall. He had touched something. The exclusive skill, fourth wall, has reacted to the vibrations hitting the wall. The moment I was waiting for had finally come. The letters poured into his stomach, creating a torrent. It was an enormous amount of stories. You, what the hell are you? The baffled eater of dreams cried out to me, but I didn't have the strength to answer. I was hard to keep my sanity with all the stories pouring out. I looked at the sentences passing in front of my eyes. Yu Jonghyuk looked at the mouth of Eater of Dreams and spoke. It was the contents of Ways of Survival. Yes, if you want to eat me, eat as much as you can. It was the 136th regression Yu Jonghyuk. Yu Jonghyuk was eaten by the Eater of Dreams and had been in the same situation as me. This, what the hell is this? Yu Jonghyuk of Ways of Survival replied on my behalf. You will know. You will experience what it is like to have lived 136 times. You will know all the loneliness, sorrow, anger, and hatred towards this damn world that I felt during this awful time. KQA. You think of humans as worse than bugs. If so, feel it from now on. Wait a minute. The pain that bugs suffer. Feel the history of the bug that you can't handle. If you have the confidence to eat me, then eat and eat as much as you can. The stories pouring all filled the stomach of the Eater of Dreams with continuous explosions. The Eater of Dreams ate Ways of Survival and struggled with the pain. Somewhere in his stomach, cracks started to appear. Ways of Survival spoke as if laughing at the confused Eater of Dreams. It was the moment when the Eater of Dreams, who was born in space and lived for 8,000 years, realized it. Q. It was the scene where Yu Jonghyuk first killed a god. I had read it over and over again, almost memorizing it. I paraphrased the following sentence on behalf of Ways of Survival. In this world, there is a story that should never be eaten. Chapter 180, Unable to be Eaten too. In the original novel, the Eater of Dreams swallowed Yu Jonghyuk, struggled against the terrible life that Yu Jonghyuk suffered and eventually disappeared. It was a disaster caused by overeating. However, this was the story in Ways of Survival. It wasn't the 136th regression that he would eat this time. Q. The third regression, the fourth regression, the fifth regression. Do you know what will happen if humans live for thousands of years? The 36th regression, the 47th regression, the 69th regression. Have you ever thought about the pain of an endlessly repeating life? The 141st regression, the 143rd regression, the 148th regression. This is human suffering, you damn tentacles bastard. There was a feast of memories that never ended. Cracks started to spread through the engorged space. After eating what shouldn't be eaten, the crazy Eater of Dreams started to riot. However, he had no place to go because this was his stomach. No one could escape from themselves. QO. The flood of words was larger than what he could handle. The stories that weren't absorbed flew away, and the flood of stories swept over the outer universe like waves. The wreckage of the damaged stomach scattered. The fourth wall is slowly opening its eyes. The fourth wall is searching for something to eat. The startled eater of dreams stared at me. The fourth wall laughs at the eater of dreams. Now the relationship between predator and prey had changed. QA. The fourth wall, which was made up of many letters, started to swallow the stories of the eater of dreams. It was purely hungry eating, without caring about gourmet food. The countless fish and other symbols of the eater of dreams tried to flee, but it couldn't escape from the persistent wall. The stories that he had eaten for 8,000 years were crushed to powder and sucked into the wall. The patterns on the wall emitted a bright light. The voice of the unauthorized guy who read the story was shocked. More than half his thoughts had been consumed, and they appeared on the wall. Surely this is black. Oh, the great old ones, where are all of you? At the last moment, he tried to abandon everything and run, but the fourth wall was one step faster. The wall exposed its terrible teeth and swallowed the contents of the stomach. Oh, great old oh! There was a dazzling light, and the open mouth of the wall finally closed. The fourth wall has finished eating. You have defeated an outer god. The star stream has failed to find a suitable name for your achievement. An unknown achievement will be added to your fifth story. Your status, which was about to be confirmed, will be re-evaluated. The fragments of the eater of dreams scattered, and I remained in the void of the outer universe with a few stories. The space didn't collapse even though the eater of dreams was dead. I still hadn't returned to my original world. The gods of the outer universe are greatly confused after hearing of the death of Eater of Dreams. The outer gods are trying to figure out what happened in his scenario. Some great old beings are watching you. A feeling of nausea rose inside me. Perhaps it was because my spirit had been eaten, but I felt weakened. Hyuk. It was a horrible experience. Yu Jonghyuk had done this in the 136th regression. Kyuyek. After vomiting a few times, I searched through the fragments of the story for my mother. Fortunately, the image formed by Eater of Dreams was preserved. She stood there with closed eyes. Was she still alive? I didn't know. I tested my mother's pulse and shook her shoulders. Please wake up. First, I had to take my mother out of here. I looked around. Why wasn't this space broken? In the 136th regression, there was the scene where Yu Jonghyuk killed the Eater of Dreams. This space collapsed, and he returned to the original world. The outer universe was operated with the power of the outer god. Once the outer god died, it should be broken. This time, the outer god died, but his space was still maintained. Why? The fourth wall is looking at you. Don't tell me. The fourth wall shakes her head with regret. The fourth wall is still hungry. It ate so many stories, yet it was still hungry. The fourth wall has started to suck the remaining remnants. It was as if a vacuum cleaner was turned on as the fourth wall opened its mouth and started to suck in the rest of the surroundings. The remaining stories, the dust and... Wait. Even my mother, who was in my arms, I flew towards the wall. Hey, don't eat that. Before I could reach the wall, my mother was sucked into it. The mouth devoured my mother's head, arms, and torso. Shit, I told you not to eat that. The fourth wall is laughing with satisfaction. The fourth wall is licking its lips as it looks at you. I had to ask something. There was something I hadn't heard yet this damn wall had swallowed my mother. What happened after being swallowed by the wall? I didn't know. One thing was for certain, none of the beings eaten by the wall had returned. The theater dungeon's master, the reincarnator Nirvana, and even the Eater of Dreams. Was there any possibility of my mother surviving when even an outer god couldn't survive? Spit her out. I started punching the fourth wall. The wall licked its lips towards me but showed no signs of eating me. The surface of the wall faintly shook at my punch. Punch and punch again. I knew it was foolish, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. How much did I hit the wall? Then a message appeared on the wall. First, I remember when I gave that child a name. I stared blankly at the sentence. I realized what it meant after a short time. He wanted to use Doc alone, and I wanted Doc Reader. Maybe it was from here that he and I became different. I groaned and hit the wall. I never wanted to hear the story this way. I wanted him to be a reader rather than a lonely person. As long as they read something, humans won't be lonely. I probably wanted to believe this. As soon as my punches stopped, countless sentences appeared on the wall. I couldn't believe how many sentences there were in a person's lifetime. I should stay at home. Why should I live like this? How long do I have to live while supporting you and that child? Suk-young, you have to endure it. Think of Daksha. The man will only do it for a moment. Mother, I think you should pay attention to Daksha. I cursed and started beating on the wall again. There were some things I remembered, but some things I didn't. Still, the feelings of those days were vivid. It was hard. At the time, I was so tired that I couldn't think of anything else. When I thought about it, it was just as hard for my child. My mother had suffered in those days. Violence against a woman, a mother and a person, it should never be done. Daksha, get in here, understood. Don't come out until mother says you can. The merciless words continuously appeared, and I once again suffered my childhood from another point of view. It sounded like a completely strange story, despite it being something I had experienced personally. This was what happened. It was so painful. It was miserable. By the way, why had I forgotten all of this? Did I just want to forget? Meanwhile, the wall continued to speak. I should have left him. No matter what other people said, I should have taken that child and gone to a distant place. She should have left in the end. Why didn't I? It was a record filled with remorse and regret. This was my mother, who was silent in reality. Now she was opening her mouth when it was a novel. It happened late in the evening. Finally, the story began. Bring more alcohol. My father's voice shouted to bring more alcohol. He pushed my mother and hit her stomach. My father was threatening. Why you? Put down the knife and let's talk. Slowly the memories were coming back. The little boy hiding in the room stuck out his head. That's right. At that time, my father was holding a knife and acting threatening. Daksha, I told you to stay in your room. My mother shouted and ran towards me. My drunk father swung the knife threateningly. You will die and I will die as well. Should we all die? Aren't we fucked up living together like this? Then let's die together. My mother threw her body forward. There was a sound and my father's body collapsed. A knife dropped to the ground. Alcohol flowed from a rolling wine bottle. I knew the next scene. My mother would pick up the fallen knife and stab my father. Then she would tell me, from now on, I will read all of this again. You Yoak. By the way. Daksha, no, put down that thing. What was this? Daksha. I picked up the knife and was trembling as I stared at my father. My small face was covered in tears. My father laughed mockingly and swung his fist. Instead of hitting my mother, my father slipped on the bottle. Then, blood emerged from his mouth. If I immediately called for help, he might have been able to live. I felt clogged up. I was the only one who could save him, and I chose not to. This accident changed our lives. The words I told the child weren't a lie. I was the one who killed him. My mother took away the knife from the child who lost his mind. Then, after a few deep breaths, she quietly woke me up. Daksha, from now on I will read all of this again. Your father did something wrong and died. This was self-defense. Understood. No matter what, you must not forget that you are the victim. My mother's voice permeated my ears. Perhaps many things were decided at that time. The mother searched for cases relating to murder and manipulated the evidence. She ruled out anything that could involve me. This ended up making the accidental death seem like a premeditated crime. Someone has to live as a murderer. Someone else has to live as the son of a murderer. Now I remembered. It was because of this. I placed my hands on the wall and bowed my head for a while. In fact, I knew. I thought it might be this, and it was the only reason that would make me understand my mother's behavior. The reason why she suddenly wrote the essay was to make me the son of a murderer, not a murderer. I often think about it. Maybe it was all an excuse. There could have been a better way. No matter what, I shouldn't have left the child alone. As a mother, I shouldn't have acted that way. In the end, I'm just a mother who ran away. This was the last sentence. I waited just in case, hitting the wall a few times. However, no more sentences appeared. It shouldn't be like this. In this way, I wouldn't be able to hear the end of this ridiculous story. Spit her out, spit her out. I started to frantically hit the wall. Fucking. The fourth wall licked my fists. The blood, memories, and stories on my fist were sucked into the fourth wall. I didn't cry. Kim Dokja was crying. The fourth wall said. Kim Dokja quietly clenched his fists. Bang. He hit the wall. Bang. He hit it again. Fucking. Kim Dokja got goosebumps. Everything was becoming a story. All his actions and words in the scenarios were becoming sentences on the wall. Shut up. Kim Dokja wanted to know. What should he do? How could he break this wall? Was this the price for reading Ways of Survival? He read it and his reality became a novel. Then a noise like a page tearing was heard. Jiek. Kim Dokja thought, hey, what is this? I finally saw unnatural words on the wall. It was like graffiti left behind by someone who read the novel. Kim Dokja was amazed. Stay upright, who was talking to him. This is your skill, who was it? You shouldn't be eaten by your skill. What? You idiot, quickly take off your hands. I saw that the wall was swallowing my fist. Turn the skill off, Kim Dokja. Enlightenment ran through my head. I didn't know who I was talking to. I didn't know if it was possible or not. However, it was clear what I had to do. I will turn off the fourth wall. An electric current flowed through the wall as it shook violently. For the first time, I felt something around me fatting. The wall was collapsing. The next moment, a message was heard. The system error due to unknown causes is temporarily fixed. Your attributes window has been restored. Do you want to check the attributes window now?